Welcome back to New Perspective. I'm Katie. I hope that you have been gaining a new perspective of what it is like to live more like Jesus in this series. We started this series with a path where we gave our life to God and continued to discuss following God's will for our lives. Then last week, we discussed what it is like to follow the path and continue on as a disciple. As a disciple, we heard about two important disciplines, spending time with God and sharing God with others. We learned that the narrow path isn't scary after all, or it is not too much out of our ability to get through it. That is very reassuring, as a narrow path used to always give me the perspective of something bad. But after last week, I had a new perspective of a narrow path, and I am hoping you do as well. Today, we are looking at that second mountain on our drawing. We are getting closer to seeing what is over that last mountain. For some of you, you may feel content completing half of the hike. You may feel content with seeing a little more of the beauty on the other side. But some of you are not content staying here at this second mountain or turning back. Those that want to keep pushing through and make sure to see the beauty after the last mountain are going to want to keep pushing through the narrow trails, the rocky paths, and the unknowns of what may be ahead, because they know that there is God's beauty on the other side of all these mountain tops. When we grow weary on our hikes or in life, we tend to give up, go slower, hesitate, question, or worry. So to continue, we have to focus, take more responsibility on our end, be more obedient to fight through the doubt, fears, and exhaustion. A word that I like to use to relate to all of those is accountable. Accountable means an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or account for your actions. In the end, it is only ourselves that we can blame if we don't finish the hike. Going back to the hike with my cousin, I could have blamed her and said she took me on a hike that was too hard, which it wasn't. Or I could have not followed her and gone my own way. Instead, I followed her, I trusted her, and I held myself responsible for fighting through my fears. We need to hold ourselves accountable to finish the hike and see God's beauty on the other side. We must live responsibly and obediently daily, moment by moment, keeping our eyes ahead, keeping our eyes on Jesus. How do we live in accountability and focus on Jesus? Hebrews 12:2 says this: "We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith." This is very important to being accountable and is the key to living successfully in the purpose and plan that God has for your life. So today, let's focus on this one thing. My new perspective is to live in accountability. Say that with me. My new perspective is to live in accountability. Accountability helps us stay on track and make the right decisions. And internally, all of us have a sense of wanting to be what we are created to be. Even if someone is not yet a follower of Jesus, there is a sense of, this is what I'm made for. To live and fulfill this created passion and desire, we need accountability externally. Accountability will help us do what's best for those around us, because as we are living His plan for our lives, we are not only loving God, but loving others. Accountability is a safeguard in our relationships. Accountability leads us to dependence on God, His strength, power, and purpose in our lives. Look at our series memory verse, 1 John 2:6. It shows us the beginning and the ongoing shift we need to make to live in accountability. Those who say they live in God should live their lives as Jesus did. To live in accountability, we have to make Jesus the leader of our lives. It also means that we should ask for forgiveness moment by moment in our lives with the desire to live as Jesus did. Hebrews 4:13 shows that our accountability is with God first and foremost. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God. Everything is naked and exposed before His eyes, and He is the one to whom we are accountable. The good news is that with all our shortcomings, we live in grace and forgiveness through Jesus. Nothing can be hidden from God. He sees what we do and knows what we think. Yet he still loves us. My new perspective is to live in accountability. Say that with me again. My new perspective is to live in accountability. In Luke 19, Jesus has an encounter with a man named Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was a man who was not very popular and was disliked by many. Despite being a cheater and making himself rich, Jesus loved him. And Jesus' encounter with Zacchaeus, his life was transformed because of his willingness to walk in accountability, not only with Jesus, but with others. He obeyed Jesus right away and then began living in accountability with others as a result. We can do the same by living in accountability. When we are accountable to someone, we are more likely to stay on track and make the right decisions. This is especially important when it comes to our faith. We need to be constantly seeking Jesus and putting him first in our lives. When we do this, we will be able to see him for who he truly is. Let's read the account of Zacchaeus in Luke 19, 1-3. Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. Let's take a moment to revisit our drawing with the path and the 3 mountains. We walked up the path to those mountains the first week. Last week, we attacked that first mountain and successfully reached the next mountain. So today we will focus on the second mountain. On that second mountain peak at the top, I want you to write accountability. We are ultimately accountable to God for our lives. We will live in grace and forgiveness because of what Jesus did for us. But we are accountable for how we live in obedience, how we handle living in the grace and forgiveness that he has given us. How can we work on being more accountable in our lives? As we go through the second mountain, we are going to have 2 application points. 1 for each side of the mountain we are currently on. These applications will help guide you to live in accountability. My new perspective is to live in accountability. What does it look like practically to live in accountability? All right, number 1, look for Jesus. Too often we start with accountability to others. While that is important, it starts first and foremost with us walking in accountability with Jesus. Jesus is the standard. If we're not walking in the accountability with him, then we can't truly walk in accountability with others. So we have to look for Jesus in our lives, and that might mean starting your relationship with him for the first time today. Or maybe it means rededicating your life to him. We have to seek out Jesus to allow him to change our hearts and minds. Then we can truly live in accountability. Zacchaeus tried to get a good look at Jesus, but couldn't because of the size of the crowd. But he was determined. We have to get determined in our lives to get a good look at Jesus. We see Zacchaeus get a good look at Jesus in Luke 19, 4-5. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. Jesus said, "Quick, come down. I must be a guest at your home today." Notice that he did not allow his shortcomings to be an excuse to keep him from seeing Jesus. Because he's short, get it? Get a good look at Jesus and let him transform you. Then you will live in the fulfillment of the life he created for you to live. Jesus sought out Zacchaeus by telling him that he was going to his house. He began investing in Zacchaeus' life immediately. Take a look at your drawing and write, "Look for Jesus" on the first side of the mountain. Look for Jesus. Look for Jesus rather than looking around for all the reasons to be afraid. For me on the hike, I was looking down and fearing the height or looking at all the possible areas a snake could come out. I guarantee next time I go on a hike, I will have those fears again. But because I had a new perspective after my hike with my cousin, I will view the hike and all the paths with a positive and excited view. Remember, my new perspective is to live in accountability. What does it look like to practically live in accountability? Number 1, look for Jesus. Number 2, set your priorities right. Not only does Zacchaeus respond quickly to following Jesus, but he responds quickly to getting his priorities aligned with Jesus. Listen as we hear how Zacchaeus had changed. This is what Zacchaeus says. I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people, I will give them back 4 times as much. Jesus replies, salvation has come to this home today, for the Son of Man comes to seek and save those who are lost. Luke 19, 8-10. Sometimes we think we know best, or our thoughts have decided that our actions will be one way. But we don't always make the best decisions. So we have to align our priorities with Jesus's. We have to ask God to help us see the actions we make from his perspective so we live more like him. We don't hear Jesus telling Zacchaeus to do this and that and give all the money back. Zacchaeus knew that he had been cheating people and that it was not something that God wanted. He recognizes right away that he needs to make things right. He had to align his priorities with Jesus's. This is for all of us. Think about your priorities. Where are you not living or aligned with the priorities of Jesus? In your relationships, your attitude in your family, at school, at church? Are you being accountable to your actions and thoughts and making sure that they align with God? Remember, my new perspective is to live in accountability. Now take a moment to add on to your drawing. On the second side of the mountain, as you come down that side of the mountain, write set priorities straight. The problem with many of us in our culture is that we do not walk in accountability, and therefore we end up losing the direction that God has for us as our Creator. We will lose direction if we are not accountable. My perspective is change when I follow Jesus and allow him and his Spirit living in me to transform me. To do so, I need to live in accountability to him and to others who are his followers. We must realize that we are going to ultimately give an accounting to God for how we live our lives, and we see that in Romans 14:2. It says, yes, each of us will give a personal account to God. We must understand and celebrate that God gives us the body of Christ to help us live faithfully as his followers. That is one reason it is so important to be a part of a local church family, and to make sure that it is a church family that is willing and wanting to live in accountability to his word rather than creating or following the standards of culture. My new perspective is to live in accountability. Just as Zacchaeus joined in Jesus' mission, we can too. This ties into last week as we talked about living as a disciple. By living as a disciple and making others disciples, we are living out what Jesus has for us to do. By being accountable, responsible, and obedient, we are living as a follower of Jesus and remaining connected through a healthy relationship with Jesus. Jesus said in Matthew 6:33, seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and he will give you everything you need. The focus of our lives can easily be survival, pleasure, building our followers on social media, Insta, you know what I mean, or getting more possessions, getting more stuff. Zacchaeus had all that, but something was missing. How he had gone about it all was robbing him of life, here and now and for eternity. God has so much more for us. He has life, and he wants us to share that life in him with others. And he will hold us accountable for how we live our lives according to his plan, his word, and for how we invest in others relationally toward this end. What if you have already made some bad decisions? What if you are in a messy relationship? What if you are going down the wrong path? What if you have done something you are ashamed of? Take your cues from Zacchaeus. Get a good look at Jesus. Quickly respond to Jesus. Make Jesus the leader of your life today. As you walk with him, set your priorities straight. Align your priorities with him and his word. He took the mess that was Zacchaeus, and he made his life and changed his perspective. Here's your challenge for this week. Pick one of the points from today and focus on putting them into practice. Let's review our one thing. My new perspective is to live in accountability.